everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I'm Brian Nemhauser. Happy to be with you on this Thursday morning as we get right into it with the Seahawks 2025 NFL schedule. We're going to go through each game. I'm going to give you my perspectives on what's going on with each of those games. I'm going to give you some insights into each one of those contests. And before I do, if you could give the show a quick like and click subscribe, that would be great. We are closing in on 20,000 subscribers. We are at, oh my gosh, we only need about 300 more subscribers on YouTube here to get to 20,000 subscribers. Would love to do that with all of you and keep growing the community. So, if you didn't see Real Hawk Talk last night with Evan Hill, Jeff Simmons, and I highly recommend you check it out. We had a lot of fun going through the games, talked through a bunch of different aspects, and also went through the 49ers schedule and the Rams schedule and the Cardinals schedule. And, you know, generally speaking, I think the Seahawks came out pretty good in all of this. I took the opportunity to, I woke up this morning and had some other things on my mind. I was up and immediately got into schedule breakdown. So I'm going to share a couple things there that are just general insights about the schedule, and then we'll get into the game-by-game capsules. I will be on with Brock and Salk later this morning at 8:30 to talk more about the schedule with them. That'll be fun. Looking forward to it. And later today, I will be talking with Dan Larson, who is a former offensive line coach of Gray Zabel, Jalen Sundell, and others for North Dakota State. Looking forward to that. And then tomorrow morning, really excited about this. We'll be having Derek Klassen from the Athletic Football Show on this show tomorrow morning at 9:30. I think maybe it's 9. I'll let you know, but keep an eye. That's why you should subscribe and click the bell to get notified when I go live. But excited to talk to Derek. He is somebody who is pretty skeptical about what the Seahawks have done this offseason. I'm really looking forward to just having a conversation with him about, you know, his skepticism, whether those are, you know, justified things, and learn some things, also challenge some of those notions and have just a fun back and forth with him. So really excited to have him aboard. So make sure you are with us for that. All right. So one of the things I am always interested in with, when you're talking about schedules is rest differential. Rest differential is this number that basically looks at, for the team that you are playing that week, how many days between the game that you're going to play against them and the previous game that they played and the previous game that you played. So if, let's say you played a Monday night game and the game's on Sunday, you will have had 6 days rest. If they played Sunday to Sunday, they will have 7 days rest. In that case, they would have a +1 rest differential. They would have an advantage of 1 day extra rest. Over the course of the season, this can add up. And the Seahawks and the 49ers in particular really were screwed last year in terms of rest differential. The Seahawks had the 4th worst rest differential in the NFL last year. As I'm going to make sure I've got this pulled up here somewhere. They had a -13 rest differential last year. The 49ers had a -21. And where this really can show up is things like when you're facing a team coming off a bye week, or you're facing a team coming off a Thursday night game. And so they have that extra kind of mini bye week. That happened a lot to the Seahawks last year. So I wanted to look into it for this year. And here are the results of that research that I did this morning. What you can see here is the Seahawks have the 5th largest rest differential in the NFL this year. And their rest differential is 7 days, at least according to this calculation. The Niners and Rams both have larger rest differentials. So the Rams have a 10-day rest differential. The Niners have a 9-day rest differential. The Cardinals are right behind, tied with the Seahawks with 7. So that is a pretty big swing. So it's a 20-day swing from a -13 to a +7 for the Seahawks. We'll go through that when we go through each game, but wanted to call that out. Mr. Pete Carroll starts off with a -19. So a tough, a tough opening for his Las Vegas Raiders. But this is a number that people debate about how critical this is. It used to be a little bit more important prior to 2000 and what was it? Let me make sure I pull this up. Prior to 2011, it was actually like teams with more rest had about a 2-point advantage relative to expectations. But they changed something in the 2011 collective bargaining agreement. And what that did is it really it crunched down on practice time. So the advantage kind of shrunk in terms of the actual amount of rest difference that people were seeing and the actual game. So this was a research report done by Sumer Sports, and by their estimate, there basically was no real advantage if you got more or less rest. As far as the Seahawks last year went, the games when they had the most rest advantage, I can go back and look, but I'm not sure that it really made a huge difference one way or another. I still think it's interesting. I was curious about it. The other thing that I was kind of curious about is when you look at the Seahawks schedule this year, they have, if I pull up the draft order, I can give this to you guys. Draft. Okay. If you look at the draft from this year, the Seahawks have 1, 2, 3, 4 games against teams that drafted in the top 10. If you look at the Seahawks schedule from last year, the Seahawks had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games against teams that drafted in the top 10 last year. So that's one interesting thing where we've talked a lot of positive things about the Seahawks schedule, but the Seahawks schedule last year had a lot of teams that were coming off of being one of the 10 worst in 2023 going into that season. But if you look at playoff teams, and you go to which are the last year, how many playoff opponents did the Seahawks have on their schedule? This would be 2023 playoff teams that they faced in 2024. The Seahawks had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they had 8 games against teams that were playoff teams the prior year. This season, they will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So they have fewer games this year against teams that were playoff teams last year than they did the year before. I think what that really kind of says in general is that you're talking about a kind of a middling schedule. You've got teams that aren't as good or as bad. The other thing that I wanted to kind of share is quarterback comparisons. And so if you look at the quarterbacks that the Seahawks faced last year versus this year, it's interesting to go, and it's a question mark for everybody to decide themselves which is easier or harder. So I put this list together and shared it last night on Twitter. You can see here. So the 2024, I kind of ordered it roughly by how good I think those quarterbacks are. It's like kind of stack ranked in descending order. So last year you had Josh Allen, you had Matt Stafford twice, you had Brock Purdy twice, you had Jordan Love, Jared Goff, Sam Darnold, Aaron Rodgers, Kyler Murray twice, Bo Nix, Kirk Cousins, Daniel Jones, Jacoby Brissett, Caleb Williams, and Skylar Thompson. And so if you look at just that list, Josh Allen's like one of the two best quarterbacks in the NFL. He's better than probably any quarterback they will face this year, depending on how you feel about Jaden Daniels. And then you've got this kind of upper middle class of quarterbacks. Matt Stafford a couple of times, Brock Purdy a couple of times, Jordan Love, Jared Goff. Sam Darnold was obviously very good last year. So that's kind of the upper middle class, I would say, of quarterbacks from last year. And yeah, I'm not high on Kyler Murray, so that's why he's a little bit lower for me. Bo Nix was the first game of the season for him, so I think he was not quite the player he started to be later, but still, I'd have him relatively low on the list as a rookie. This year, you've got Jaden Daniels, who I think is clearly the best quarterback on that list, although CJ Stroud fans may disagree. You still got Matt Stafford and Brock Purdy twice, although that's a question mark. Will Matt Stafford play the full season? Will Brock Purdy play the full season? We don't know that. Baker Mayfield, Michael Penix Jr., Trevor Lawrence, Bryce Young. I would say that's where the upper middle class kind of ends this year. So I would say they face more upper middle class kind of quarterbacks. I have Michael Penix Jr. in that list. I think he's going to be very good. Trevor Lawrence is debatable. I think he has been a lesser player than Geno Smith in his time, and people can debate that, but that's what the statistics say. Bryce Young is a guy that ended the season quite well. We'll talk about that in a second. Aaron Rodgers, I'm assuming, is going to sign with the Steelers and be their quarterback. I don't think he's very good anymore. And then you've got JJ McCarthy, who is just a total wild card. Cam Ward, first overall pick, played the first overall pick last year, and Caleb Williams, who is, I think, a better prospect and was really, really bad last year. And then you've got the Colts with either Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones. And then you got the Saints with Spencer Rattler or Tyler Shuck. So the bottom part of that 2025 quarterback list is maybe the bottom three are worse roughly than the bottom three from last year. But I think it's a good reminder that the Seahawks played some pretty mediocre quarterbacks last year in a lot of those games. I don't know that it's not like they're playing Patrick Mahomes and, all the best, but Jaden Daniels is really, really good, was really, really good last year. CJ Stroud can be really, really good. And then you've got, guys like Baker Mayfield who can put up big numbers. So it's an interesting mix, and I think you're going to have to see what happens with guys like Michael Penix Jr. Does Trevor Lawrence take a big step with Liam Cohen? All those kinds of things. But that starts to get us into our game-by-game capsule. So let's go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to take us through each one of these games and share some insights into each one of those. So let's start with the San Francisco 49ers. So 49ers is week 1 at home. For this one, I'm not going to go that deep, to be honest, because I think you guys know the 49ers pretty well. Obviously, the things to be aware of with what's different with the 49ers, it's a little bit hard to say. One of the key things to watch for in this game is going to be what happens with their defensive line. And as of now, I'm expecting Alfred Collins and CJ West to be there for them. I expect Mykel Williams to be the opposite edge. But if that doesn't happen, then you've got some interesting questions there on the defensive side of the ball. I expect Brandon Ayuk's going to be back and full go. They will not have Demarcus Robinson, the free agent wide receiver. He has been suspended for 3 games, so he will not be available. But you will get Ricky Pearsall, Jawan Jennings, all being a major part of the offense. We'll see about Trent Williams, but generally you'd expect him to play early on. They have a new left guard. Ben Barch is their left guard. He's played with them before. He's instead of Aaron Banks. That will be an interesting difference. And then, you've got Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, the whole crew, George Kittle kind of back doing their thing. Defensively, as I said, if it's not CJ West and Alfred Collins, you're talking about Jordan Elliott and Kevin Givens. If it's not Mykel Williams, you're talking about probably your Turgros Matos. The starting linebacker will likely be opposite of Fred Warner, will likely be D. Winters, who is a step down from Dre Greenlaw for sure. We'll see what's going to happen with Nick Martin. Maybe the rookie steps up. But the cornerback position also is a question mark. Charvarius Ward no longer with them. Trey Brown was signed from the Seahawks. That will be kind of a Trey Brown revenge game potentially. And then the other thing to really watch there is their free safety position. So Malik Mustafa, their talented rookie from last year, is out with an ACL for most of this year. Don't know who their other starting safety will be next to Jair Brown. It could be Richie Grant from Atlanta, who they signed. Could be George Odom. Could be Marcus Siegel, the rookie. Don't know. So that's kind of a quick look at that game. I have mentioned a couple other times, this will be only the 4th time that the Seahawks will have hosted a division rival to open a season since joining the NFC West. The last 3 times was 2023 against the Rams, 2010 against the 49ers, and 2009 against the St. Louis Rams. They won 2 out of those 3 games, but still, that one is going to be interesting to watch. All right, next on the list are the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh Steelers are a team that will have, we're going to start looking at some of this as well. Excuse me while I have to pull open. I think I can do this a different way. Pittsburgh Steelers are going to have played. Pittsburgh Steelers are going to have played at the New York Jets the week before. So this will be their home opener. And if you look at the Steelers, obviously DK Metcalf is the key storyline here. Everyone's going to be talking about that. They also traded away George Pickens. Robert Woods is a guy that they added. And he will be probably part of that receiver combination. The other receiver, Calvin Austin, there's some question marks a little bit at that receiver spot. Their offensive line is not bad, and they will be likely getting their rookie first-round pick, Troy Fautanu, who missed a lot of last season, back. He did have a knee injury, so hopefully he'll be back to full go. Mason McCormick, the rookie from last year who played well, Zach Frazier, young, talented center, Isaac Samolo, a decent left guard, and then Broderick Jones at left tackle. So this is a quality offensive line. And then I'm assuming that Aaron Rodgers is going to be the quarterback, but it could be Mason Rudolph. Could be Kirk Cousins for all we know. But, still waiting to find out about Aaron Rodgers. Any of those guys, but let's say Mason Rudolph and Aaron Rodgers are the most likely. I think there's still a lot of question marks. And then as far as the running back goes, they've got Jalen Warren, who's a talented player. Then they've got Caleb Johnson, who they drafted. it's a question mark about what that running back room outside of Jalen Warren, that's a question mark. If you look at their defense, pretty solid defense from last year. And if we look at, let's take a look at DVOA for them on that, in that regard. So the Steelers finished last year as the 15th ranked team in DVOA. They were 19th on offense and 8th on defense. So they were a top 10 defense. That's going to be part of how that game unfolds for sure. I think a key thing here is going to be, are the Seahawks able to run the ball on the road in Pittsburgh? That's going to be a key aspect of this game. And when you, there'll be no rest differential advantage for people that are curious this early in the season. There is some aging going on with that defensive line. Cam Hayward's obviously quite old at this point. Sorry, Cam, but it's true. I can pull open for you his exact age. He's 36. Yeah. So he's still playing quite well, but he's 36. TJ Watt is 30. But they have Keanu Benton, who's been, I think, a good young nose tackle for them. Derek Harmon, I'm a big fan of the rookie that they drafted. I think he's going to be a good player. Then you got Patrick Queen as one of the linebackers. So him against Mike McDonald will be kind of an interesting little reunion. Peyton Wilson, who was a rookie linebacker last year, talented player. Alex Highsmith, who is a really good edge rusher opposite of TJ Watt. He can cause all sorts of problems. And the secondary, Darius Slay is their kind of, quote, big addition, and he'll be playing opposite of Joey Porter Jr., who's quite good. And then they got Minka Fitzpatrick. So they've got a decent secondary there. And I think that defense is not going to be an easy group. I think you're also going to be having to expect the Seahawks defense to really hold down. Like if the Steelers put up 20 plus points, that's probably a tough game for the Seahawks to win. But that's the initial read on that one. Next, Seahawks are going to be home against the New Orleans Saints. And one thing I meant to pull up, let me see if I can find it. There it is. I meant to say this all along. Sorry, guys. Odds for every game are out. The Seahawks are 1.5 point underdogs against the 49ers. They are also 1.5 point underdogs against the Steelers. So underdogs in their first 2 weeks. When the schedule turns to the Saints, they become 6.5 point favorites. So a little bit of a change there relative to being underdogs for the first 2 games of the season. When you look at that Saints team, obviously a lot of turnover. New coach, Kellen Moore, comes from Philadelphia. Clint Kubiak will be facing, quote, his former team, as will John Benton and the other guys that came over. They've got Chris Olave, Brandon Cooks, Rashid Shaheed. So they've got some quality at the receiver position. Their offensive line is a little bit made over, but also has some talent. Kelvin Banks, they drafted early. We all talked about him plenty leading up to the draft. They also have Eric McCoy, who's one of the best centers in football. Cesar Ruiz, who improved at guard under John Benton. And then Talisi Fuaga, who was a top pick last year. So they have a lot of top talent on that offensive line. As far as who's going to be running behind it, Alvin Kamara, obviously can be dangerous. Right now, it's a question mark of whether Tyler Shuck or Spencer Rattler are going to be the guys that are the quarterback at that point. So I would say that offense is maybe a little bit more dangerous than you might think. It really depends on the quarterback. But as far as the other players, it's not quite as awful as I think I had assumed it was. They will have been playing the 49ers at home the week before. No rest advantage for either team, Sunday to Sunday, but coming off a game against San Francisco. So, yeah, rough. Could be a rough start for the New Orleans Saints. Could be a rough whole season, to be very clear. The Seahawks are 6.5-point favorites for that game. Let's keep going. Actually, let's talk about their defense for a second, just so we have some familiarity there. Chase Young had a decent year last year. Cameron Jordan's still there, but older. Demario Davis is a good off-ball linebacker, but is aging. Isaac Yiadom got them from San Francisco. He's a decent corner, not great. Kool-Aid McKinstry had an okay first year. Honey Badger Tyrann Mathieu is there at free safety. Justin Reed was added, the safety from Kansas City. The defense looks really vulnerable to me. This looks like a team without anyone that's particularly great. So that is the that is the best I can do about the New Orleans Saints. Now, interestingly, the Seahawks travel on the road to the Arizona Cardinals for a Thursday night game in week 4. They are 2.5-point underdogs. 2.5-point underdogs. So they're underdogs. Seahawks are underdogs in most of their games this year, for what it's worth. That was also the case last year. I think they were only favorites in maybe 2 of their games going into the season or something crazy like that. So the Cardinals are 2.5-point favorites. And not going to spend a ton of time on detailing the Cardinals team, but I will share a couple pieces. So the Cardinals will have also, just like the Saints, be coming off a game against the 49ers. They will have played at San Francisco, and both the 49ers, both the Cardinals and the Seahawks will be on 4 days rest. So there's no rest advantage, although the Cardinals will be the home team. So at the same time, since they are traveling to San Francisco, they will be flying back to Arizona. So you could kind of say to some extent that negates a little bit of what would be a normal advantage if they were a home team to a home Thursday night, but essentially no difference there. Keep in mind with Arizona, they were the 12th ranked DVOA team last year. They were the 11th ranked offense and the 14th ranked defense. That's kind of crazy because when I look at Arizona, I just see a team that was far less than their numbers indicate. Part of that is due to the Seahawks sweeping them last year, and the Seahawks were a pretty middling team. And they, I think, handled them pretty well in both of those games. So, the big things here with Arizona is they have made a lot of changes, especially on defense. And they do have a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. coming off his rookie year that was pretty disappointing and incredibly talented, could make a huge leap in his second year. The offensive line, I think is middle of the road. Like, it's definitely better than what the Seahawks has been. Their center has been one of the better centers in the league. Evan Brown, we know him. He is a serviceable but not great left guard. Paris Johnson is very similar to Charles Cross, decent but not elite. Jonah Williams at right tackle is, I think, a pretty decent player. And then Isaiah Adams at right guard. Kyler Murray, we don't have to go into that. We know who he is. James Conner is a year older, and he is a punishing back. They do have some guys behind him. Trey Benson was a rookie last year. I don't think he really played that well. Amari DeMarcado actually was a more dangerous runner for them. And then if you look defensively, this is where things really have changed for the Arizona Cardinals. They have added Calais Campbell to play one defensive end, who was the number 1 run defender on the defensive line in the NFL last year, according to PFF. Dalvin Tomlinson replaces Roy Lopez at nose tackle. And then Darius Robinson, who was their first round pick last year, returns in his second season. He had a lot of injuries last year. Even when he was back, I don't think he was that impactful of a player, but you never know. There can be year 1 to year 2 jumps. We saw it with Derek Hall. We've seen it with other players. So don't count him out yet. I was never particularly high on Darius Robinson, but we will see what comes of that. They brought back Baron Browning, but they also have Zaven Collins. They drafted Jordan Birch, all outside edge players. They signed Josh Sweat, who was like the Super Bowl MVP practically last year against the Chiefs. They have BJ Ojolari, so they have some interesting edge rush options that they didn't really have a year ago. Their linebacker situation has been messy. Mac Wilson is a good blitzer, but suspect in other areas. Akeem Davis-Gaither, they signed from Cincinnati, expected to be the starter, but Cody Simon, the rookie from Ohio State, could push his way into the starting lineup. He's an interesting guy to watch. The secondary, their cornerback room was a mess last year. They drafted Will Johnson. That could end up being a really big addition for them if Will Johnson pans out. If not, it gets a little bleak after that. So Max Melton was their second round pick last year, did not play that well, returns expected to be the starter. Some guys to watch out for there. Denzel Burke, who they drafted from Ohio State. I like him. I think he's got a chance to make some noise. Sean Murphy-Bunting was a player that they played more than they probably wanted to last year. Garrett Williams is a great nickel corner. So there's some, quality in that Arizona team, despite what I think what most of us probably feel about that group. So let's keep going here. Week 5 is at home against the Tampa Bay Bucks. The Bucks are 1.5 point favorites. So the Seahawks, of their first 3 home games, they are underdogs for 2 of those 3 games. Okay, let's get to know the Bucks. The Bucks, by the way, the Bucks will have played home against the Philadelphia Eagles the game before. The Seahawks, coming off a Thursday night road game in Arizona, will have 10 days rest for this one. The Bucks will only have 7. So this is the first game where one team will have a rest advantage. The Seahawks will have a 3-day rest advantage over the Tampa Bay Bucks heading into this one. Tampa Bay last year was the 11th ranked DVOA team. So the Cardinals were 12th. Tampa Bay was 11th. They were 7th in offense, 16th in defense. And if you look at their defensive performance a little bit more, where that really showed up was in pass defense. They were 23rd. They were 23rd in pass defense in DVOA. They were actually 6th in run defense. So pretty good. Pretty good performance against the run, but definitely struggled against the pass. Some of that was injury. Some of that was just lack of quality. And if you look at who Tampa Bay lost, they lost their center, Robert Hainsley. They lost linebacker Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, KJ Britt, a linebacker, and Mike Edwards, a safety. They added Hassan Reddick, and also Anthony Walker, a linebacker. Not much else in terms of their free agent additions. When you look at this, let's go with the defense first. So Yaya Diaby was a good edge rusher last year. If Hassan Reddick can recover and be more of the player he had been, you put those two outside of Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey. It's a very talented pass rushing group there. They, outside of that, the secondary, they've got some question marks in the cornerback room. So, Antoine Winfield Jr. is a great safety. He missed some time. That was part of their problem. Jamel Dean can be a good corner, as can Zion McCollum. But they struggled a little bit last year. They struggled a little bit last year in the secondary, and this might be a game where you're talking about the passing game needing to kind of carry the day. So if you look at like Zion McCollum was a 67 graded corner last year. Jamel Dean was a 75 graded corner. Christian Isian is their other starting safety next to Antoine Winfield. He was a 57 graded safety. Antoine Winfield last year was a 57 graded safety in the games that he played. He only played 346 snaps over 10 games, so he missed a fair amount of time. If you look at some of the weakness there, like they struggled at linebacker and they struggled in defending people in pass coverage for the linebacker. So I think this is a team that's really built on what could be a very strong defensive line, very disruptive defensive line, and then some spotty secondary play. On offense, you've got Mike Evans, Chris Godwin coming off a major injury. They did draft Emeka Egbuka, who is a very solid receiver, very JSN-like. And then you've got a very decent to good offensive line with Tristan Wirfs, Graham Barton, Ben Bredesen, Cody Mauk, and Luke Godeke. So, Baker Mayfield triggering all of it, and Bucky Irving, who was a really good rookie running back last year for them. So powerful offense. One of the other big changes here is Liam Cohen's no longer their offensive coordinator, and figuring out how they're going to do with Josh Grizzard as their OC will be interesting. That could be a big difference, and we've seen big changes based off of OCs. All right. Next, the Seahawks go on the road to face the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars, 1.5-point favorites. So 4 of the first 6 games, the Seahawks are 1.5-point underdogs. So not terrible, but not great either, especially when you're talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars. So the Jags have a new head coach, Liam Cohen. That's the big thing there. You may remember their offensive coordinator, Grant Udinski, was a guy who was one of the candidates for the Seahawks. And they made some pretty big additions, especially in the draft. They added Travis Hunter. It's a big, big add for them. They also added Bahashal Tutin, who is a really talented athlete at running back. Jack Kaiser, who's one of my favorite linebackers in this draft. Jonah Monheim, the center, who I liked quite a bit. And if you look at, by the way, rest differential on this one, Tampa Bay. So I talked about Tampa Bay. Jacksonville will have played Sunday night. Sorry, they've played Monday night against Kansas City. So the Jags will have come off a game against the Kansas City Chiefs, which is obviously going to be a circle on their schedule. And then they're going to have one less day of rest coming to play for the Seahawks to co-play them. So not sure that that's going to make much of a difference, but I think playing Kansas City the week before can have some effect. The Jags, when you look at this team, they were the 26th team in DVOA last year. They were, let me pull this up. Sorry, guys. They were 17th on offense and 31st on defense. 31st on defense. So when you talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars, there's going to be a lot of attention on Trevor Lawrence and the offense and Liam Cohen coming in, Travis Hunter being able to play receiver. They added Diami Brown, who made some plays. Obviously, Brian Thomas Jr. was a great rookie receiver last year. They have like a below average offensive line from my perspective. They do have 2 new starters, and Patrick McCarry from Baltimore at right guard and Robert Hainsley at center. I think the offense is good. I'm really curious what it's going to look like with Liam Cohen. I'm not the biggest Trevor Lawrence believer. I'll just be very honest about that for now. But you're talking about a team that was, wrong tab. Talking about a team that still with a lot of that talent was 17th in the NFL. They're basically the same as the Seahawks were last year. Offensively, the Seahawks, I think, were 18th in DVOA on offense. Defensively, Trayvon Walker, former number 1 overall pick, decent pass rusher. Josh Hines-Allen, a really good edge rusher opposite him. In the middle, Mason Smith and Devon Hamilton, like they just don't have, like Eric Armstead is a guy that, obviously would get some time there. Curious why he's listed as a backup. I wonder if there's some Eric Armstead news. I don't know. I'd expect Eric Armstead to be playing, so I assume him to be up there. Linebacker wise, it's a pretty barren room. Devin Lloyd, Jerrion Jones. I mean, these are sorry, that's a cornerback. But Devin Lloyd, I think it's a questionable group of linebackers. You get to the cornerbacks, Jerrion Jones and Tyson Campbell. It's rough. I don't feel like Jacksonville did nearly enough to upgrade this defense. I think their plan essentially is, let's hope the offense is dynamite and can carry the defense. But I'm looking, guys, at their grades for their players that got the most snaps last year. There's only 2 guys that had grades over 70. Devin Lloyd, the linebacker, and Josh Hines-Allen, the edge rusher. Everybody else way down. Now, obviously, you're going to see Travis Hunter get some cornerback reps. You can see him, it's going to be fun to see, but this is a game that the Seahawks have every reason to think that they can go into Jacksonville and get this game. All right, Texans at home. The Texans will be coming off a bye week. So this is the first time the Seahawks will have a rest disadvantage. The Seahawks will have 7 days of rest to Sunday. The Texans will have 13 days of rest, I think is what I've got. Maybe depending on how you calculate it, could say it's 14 days of rest. Let's call it 13. And this will be, let's see, for Houston. Kind of curious about their overall schedule here and where they're going to be coming from. So the Texans' schedule starts at the Rams, home against the Bucs, at the Jags, home against the Titans, at the Ravens, and then a bye week. So they will have done a decent amount of traveling in their first few games. Excuse me, I had to sneeze. But they will be coming off a bye week. If we look where the Texans were last year, Texans were 16th in DVOA. Texans were 26th in offensive DVOA, but they were 3rd in defensive DVOA. And I think people think about the Texans, and the first thing they think about is CJ Stroud. they should be thinking about Will Anderson, should be thinking about Danielle Hunter, should be thinking about Azeez Al-Shaair and Derek Stingley Jr., one of, if not the best cornerbacks in football. Jalen Petrie is a good nickel corner. Kalen Bullock's a good free safety. Like, they've got some talent on that side of the ball. Worth noting that they signed Darrell Taylor, former Seahawks draft pick, former Bear, now with them. But that defense with D'Amico Ryans as the head coach has been really good. And that's going to be a big part of this matchup for the Seattle for Seattle. If you're curious, the Seahawks are actually favored in this game by 1.5 points. This will be a Monday night football game. And let me get this right. So it should be 15. I think that's right. Yes. Okay. So it's even an extra long rest for the Texans coming off a bye week and then having a Monday night game. As far as who the Texans have on offense, it should come, these should be names obviously CJ Stroud, obviously Joe Mixon. They drafted Woody Marks, the rookie from USC, the running back there. Nico Collins, Christian Kirk, Jalen Noel, and Jaden Higgins, the rookie teammates. Tank Dell, if he's back, we'll see when he's back. But there's a lot of talent at the receiver spot. Dalton Schultz is a good tight end. Their issue is offensive line. They had a worse offensive line than Seahawks last year. I would argue it got worse this year. They traded out Laramie Tunsil, their Pro Bowl, all-pro quality left tackle, and replaced him with Cam Robinson, who is a slightly above average, maybe league average left tackle. Laken Tomlinson they signed as a backup from the Seahawks. Trent Brown could be somebody who earns some reps, but I think that offensive line is a mess, and I think that the Seahawks defense should have a lot of success giving that group all sorts of trouble. So that is the game against the Houston Texans. Bye week in week 8 for the Seahawks. Next is a fun game from this year. This is the Washington Commanders, and this is going to be a Sunday night game. So the Seahawks for this one will be 5.5 point underdogs. This is the largest spread against the Seahawks for the entire year, at least at this point. They are 5.5 point underdogs for a Sunday night football game against the Commanders. The Commanders will be coming off a Monday night football game against the Chiefs. So that's an interesting one. They will be at Kansas City, and they'll be coming home, basically playing on 6 days rest. The Seahawks will be coming off their bye week. They will have 13 days of rest for that game. That will make this the largest rest differential advantage of 7 days for the Seahawks for the year. Will Mike McDonald be able to take advantage of the bye week to be scouting the Commanders to come up with a good plan to slow down Jaden Daniels? Jalen Milroe certainly will be a good scout quarterback to replicate what Jaden Daniels can do in the pocket and give them some of those looks. This is a team that last year was the 10th ranked DVOA team overall. They were 6th on offense, but 23rd on defense. And if you look at like why they were so bad on defense, it was 20th against the pass and 26th against the rush. So this is a group that definitely made some changes this offseason. I don't know if they made enough, to be honest. They bring back Bobby Wagner, so it'll be great to see Bobby. Great to go up against, obviously, Dan Quinn. But when you look at a team that was really challenged on defense last year, and then they traded away, or they let, did they trade away? Jonathan Allen's no longer with the team, one way or another. So they replaced Jonathan Allen with Javon Kinlaw, who I just don't think is that good. They paid him a lot of money. Dietrich Wise, they signed from New England. Will Harris from New Orleans at strong safety they added. I like Mikey Sainristil. It was a good player, good rookie last year. Frankie Louvu is obviously a talented off-ball backer who can also be an edge rusher. Marshawn Lattimore was a disaster last year in the playoffs. Maybe he'll be better after an offseason, but their cornerback room outside of Sainristil is a question mark. We'll see if Trey Amos, a corner that they drafted, I think a lot of people think highly of, could earn some snaps for them. But that defense is rough. And like, of all the players that played for them last year, there's only one player that had a grade above 66 that played more than 200 snaps, and that was Bobby Wagner. So it's a rough group, and I think that's going to be where the Seahawks are going to have to make hay, especially if they can get the ground game going. If you can get the ground game going and play defense, you can win anywhere, and that's kind of what Mike Macdonald is trying to do. On offense, you got Scary Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, obviously from San Francisco, who has tortured the Seahawks in the past, but I think Deebo Samuel is no longer that player. They don't have a lot of other receiving threats. Maybe Luke McCaffrey makes a jump. Maybe Michael Gallup, who they signed after taking a year off, like retiring and then coming back, maybe he'll be back to his old self. Their offensive line gets the advantage of adding Laramie Tunsil after Houston let him go, traded him. But otherwise, they didn't make a bunch of change. They did draft Josh Connerly Jr. I think he's a project. I'm not sure he's really ready. They did play Brandon Coleman right out of the gate last year. He's a project. So, like, there's some question marks along that offensive line for sure. Zach Ertz is their tight end who's aging. But I mean, this is all about Jaden Daniels. I mean, Jaden Daniels is just a fantastically talented, smart, like explosive player who does not make many mistakes. So facing him while he's playing on his home field on Sunday night, it's a tall order. And the Seahawks defense will have to be at their best for that game. For that game to go their way. All right, next. Cardinals at home. We're not going to re-go over the Cardinals. I will share in terms of rest differential and who they will have been playing. Cardinals will have played a Monday night football game at Dallas the prior game. So they will have only 6 days of rest to then go back-to-back on the road at Dallas and then at Seattle to face the Seahawks. So the Seahawks will have a little bit of a rest advantage. And also, they will be coming off a primetime game. Both teams will be coming off a primetime game. The Seahawks will be coming off a Sunday night primetime game. The Cardinals will be coming off a Monday night primetime game. As far as who's favored in this game, the Seahawks are favored by 1.5. So interestingly, the Cardinals are favored by 2.5 in the early game in Arizona. That's a Thursday night game. Seahawks favored by 1.5 in Seattle. So I'm guessing the extra point difference is the Thursday night aspect. Road teams do not play well on Thursday night, typically, but that's just an interesting little tidbit. The Rams, let's keep going. We have not talked about the Rams yet. This is a road game. The Rams for this game will have played at San Francisco the prior week. That is the third team that the Seahawks are going to face that will have faced the 49ers the week before. Each team will have 7 days rest, so no rest advantage for either team. The Rams are favored by 4.5 points. 4.5 points. That is the second largest spread of the season for an opponent against the Seahawks. So they really think that the Rams have the Seahawks number. If we remember the Rams from last year, they were the 17th DVOA team. The Seahawks were 18th. Rams were 17th. Rams were 10th on offense, 26th on defense. And granted, some of their players started playing better as the season wore on, but they were 26th in defense. And when you look at why they were 26th in defense, the Rams were 25th against the pass and 21st against the run. They were bad in general. What they've done, adding Poona Ford at nose tackle, I think is good. I don't think Bobby Brown, who was their nose tackle last year, was bad. I do think Poona Ford's an upgrade. I think one of the things that doesn't get talked about enough with the Rams is everyone's so complimentary, and I think justifiably, about Braden Fisk, Kobe Turner, Byron Young, Jared Verse as these just stud pass rushers, which they are. What they aren't are great run defenders. And so I think Jared Verse, I will take him off that list. Jared Verse is a great defender in all regards. Kobe Turner is okay. But Braden Fisk was a 38 graded run defender last year in the inside of your line. You're talking about, and you've removed Michael Hoyt, who was a guy that they used a lot and was a pretty important part of their defense last year. So I think guys like Byron Young, 55 graded run defender last year as an edge player. I think there's some question marks, at least from a run defense standpoint, whether or not they've really done enough to fix that. From a linebacker standpoint, I thought Omar Spates was a rookie last year that really started to come on and helped that defense play better. We'll see if Troy Reeder holds on to that starting spot. He was not a good player last year, 57 graded linebacker. They did add Nate Landman from Atlanta. I like Nate Landman. I think he is a guy I'd guess is going to earn a starting spot. Chris Paul Jr., the rookie that they drafted, pretty decent player as well. He could push for snaps. Secondary is interesting. I mean, Ahkello Witherspoon played well for them when he came there. Darius Williams was up and down. I don't think he was very good in general. And then you've got at nickel corner, whether it's Quentin Lake or someone else, I still think the secondary is a question mark. So I'm not sure they've, quote, solved the defensive problems. Offensively, they've traded out Cooper Kupp for Devontae Adams. Obviously, this is going to be the Cooper Kupp first game in LA since being let go. We'll see if Puka Nacua is healthy at this point in the season. He has dealt with a lot of injuries. We will see if Matthew Stafford is healthy at this point in the season. He is 37 years old. So we're later in the season. It's possible these guys could be banged up. Obviously, Kyron Williams, they've got a lot of running back options. I like Jarquez Hunter, the rookie that they drafted. The offensive line is good. I don't think it's great, but I think it's good, which is a far cry from where the Seahawks have been. I think a player to watch out for the Rams this year that not as many people talk about is Jordan Whittington. He was a rookie last year. I think he's a very physical player. I think he's as big of a reason why the Seahawks moved on from Cooper Kupp as Devontae Adams. I think they have big things in mind for Jordan Whittington. Good returner, but I think he's also just a physical player in general and could turn into one of their better, another one of their kind of diamonds in the rough finds. So look, people are they're very high on the Rams. I'm not as high on the Rams. The Rams surprised me last year in the playoffs, so I may just be chronically under on the Rams. But I think that, to me, a lot rides on Matt Stafford. If Jimmy Garoppolo ends up having to be their quarterback, I think it's a very different team. The Titans in week 12. This game is in Tennessee, and the Seahawks will be coming off, obviously, this away game in LA, not a far distance to travel, but the Titans will be coming off a home game against the Texans. So a divisional game for them. That'll be, as intense as it gets for the Titans, whatever that looks like this year. No rest advantage for either team. The Seahawks obviously played, did a joint scrimmage, a joint practice with the Titans last year, went to Tennessee for that. They have some familiarity with those players having done that. And this is a team that made a lot of changes. You got a new quarterback in Cam Ward, number 1 overall pick. Tyler Lockett is obviously a big part of the reunion here. You've also got Draymond Jones, who played for the Seahawks last couple of years. You've got Cody Barton, who played with the Seahawks before. So definitely some Seahawks connections in this game. I mean, they've got so many receivers. It's a really interesting mix. I don't know which of these guys are going to end up being the guys getting the most snaps. They got Van Jefferson, Tyler Lockett, Calvin Ridley. They got Alik Ayumanor, the rookie from Stanford, who's a talented player. They've got Treylon Burks. They've got Xavier Restrepo, who played with Cam Ward in Miami. They've got a lot of names. We'll see what comes out of it. None of them, I think, are excellent players. Their offensive line's okay. Lloyd Cushenberry is a good center. Kevin Zeitler is a good right guard. J.C. Latham at right tackle is okay. Dan Moore is a decent left tackle. Peter Skoronski is a decent left guard. Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, okay running back room. But it's a work in progress on offense for sure. Defensively, you're talking about Tavondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons in the middle of that line are very big, very disruptive. They're hoping that Draymond Jones can help with the pass rush. Arden Key, they've got some holes. They definitely have some holes. And this is a game the Seahawks should feel like they can go on the road and win. Some other rookies to keep an eye on: Oluwafemi Oladejo, the edge rusher from UCLA; Kevin Winston, the safety from Penn State. Those two could be starters by the time the Seahawks face the Tennessee Titans. Then Seahawks come home. And by the way, in that game, I forgot to tell you who was favored. Seahawks are favored by 1.5 points. Seahawks come home to face the Vikings. They are favored by 1.5 points over the Vikings. I find that kind of interesting at this point in the year, given the Vikings. I think the main thing the Vikings did negatively was change at quarterback. There's at least a question mark about J.J. McCarthy versus Sam Darnold, but their offensive line should be significantly better, not just because they added Donovan Jackson, the rookie, at left guard, or Ryan Kelly at center, or Will Fries at right guard, but Christian Darrisaw is a Pro Bowl, close to all-pro level left tackle who missed most of the year last year. He is back. Brian O'Neill is a very good right tackle, so I think their offensive line is going to be very good. And then the best receiving duo in the NFL, by my estimation, and Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, makes for a lot of weapons. And then TJ Hawkinson at tight end. They still have Aaron Jones at running back, who I think is a good but not great player. They did add Jordan Mason from San Francisco. I like him as a running back and is a good pair with Aaron Jones. So the offense, really, it's just going to depend on whether J.J. McCarthy can operate it. Defensively, they added Jonathan Allen from Washington. They added Javon Hargrave from San Francisco. They have like pretty impressive rush group with Jonathan Greenard, obviously Andrew Van Ginkel. Both of those guys, Pro Bowl level players, all pro, almost level players. Some of them defensive player of the year votes last year. Blake Cashman and Ivan Pace at inside linebacker are very good. Where they're weaker is cornerback, like Isaiah Rodgers and Mekhi Blackman. They're Harrison Smith is very old at this point. Josh Metellus, like, I think it's not a great group there. Byron Murphy Jr. is a decent nickelback, but their secondary is where there's question marks. They get a lot of their production based off their pass rush, and we'll just have to see if they can continue that in 2025. All right, I'm going to speed along here. The Falcons, they are, oh, by the way, on that, the Vikings will be coming off a game at Green Bay, their rival. So a big emotional game, and then they got to travel across the country to play the Seahawks. The Falcons are next. The Falcons will be coming off a Thursday night game. Is that right? Against the Jets. They will have playing at the Jets, and then so that's an interesting one. The Seahawks are 1.5 point underdogs for that game. As far as that team goes, obviously big changes there at quarterback. Michael Penix Jr. will get his first full season. I think he's significantly better than Kirk Cousins. The Seahawks played at Atlanta last year and whooped up on that team. They whooped up on that offensive line, especially. That's something just to keep in mind. Drake London did do some damage against the Seahawks. Kyle Pitts had some moments, but also dropped some stuff. And then defensively, this is where they really struggled, and they added Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr. as their edge rushers. They also signed Leonard Floyd. So they've done their best to like add a lot of speed rushers. Morgan Fox, they added on the defensive line from the Chargers. I think he's a decent player, but it's still like they got rid of Grady Jarrett. You're going to really trust Ruka Roaro, a rookie from last year, to step up, or Contavious Street. Like, they've got real questions on the defensive line and the defense in general. The secondary, Jesse Bates is a really good safety. AJ Terrell, Jesse Bates is aging though. AJ Terrell, D. Alford, Mike Hughes. I think there's just some question marks at corner. So defensively, this is still a questionable team for sure. All right. The Colts at home. The Colts will be in Seattle, and Seahawks are a 3.5 point favorite for this. That is the second largest spread in favor of Seattle on the season. The largest is when they're home against the Saints. So home against the Colts will be coming off a game at Jacksonville. So no rest differential difference there, but they will fly east to Jacksonville, and then they will fly west to Seattle in consecutive weeks. So back-to-back road games. And the question here is going to be quarterback. So you've obviously got Anthony Richardson, who has been an awful quarterback to this point, took himself out of a game last year. And they signed Daniel Jones to a very big contract. And the reality is he could be the starter by that point. Daniel Jones came in with a terrible Giants team last year and beat the Seahawks. Now, I think there's a lot of extenuating circumstances, but I almost would rather face Anthony Richardson because I think Anthony Richardson's a guy that just has a lot of flaws in his game. And I don't think his decision-making is either his decision-making or his accuracy are good enough to really fear him. They did add Tyler Warren, great tight end. They do have Michael Pittman Jr., who's a nice receiver. Josh Downs, who's also a good receiver. The offensive line, they obviously lost their center and their guard and Ryan Kelly and Will Fries, but Matt Gonsalves, who was a right tackle for them last year, moves inside to guard. I think he's going to be just fine. Tanner Bortolini, I think, is a very good center. I think they're going to be fine on the offensive line. Jonathan Taylor has been their workhorse, their bell cow at running back. And, that's what they're going to come in and try to do. Defensively, this was a team that was 15th in DVOA last year. They were 22nd against the pass and 14th against the rush. And I'm not sure they did a lot to change that. They did add Charvarius Ward at corner, but Jalen Jones, Kenny Moore, are there other cornerbacks? They added Cam Bynum from Minnesota at safety with Nick Cross. I just think that like DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart in the middle are a load. Leatu Latu, first round pick edge rusher last year, was not great. He wasn't terrible. He wasn't great. They have some questions at linebacker, and they didn't address that. So the defense comes into this game still, or into this season, with a lot of questions that they have not yet answered. All right, we already talked about the Rams. I will say for that Rams home, when the Seahawks play the Rams at home, the Rams are still 1.5 point favorites, even though it's a Thursday night game and it's in Seattle. Just in case you're curious, the Rams will have played home against the Lions 4 days earlier. So the Seahawks will be home against the Colts and then stay home against the Rams. The Rams will be home against the Lions and then travel to Seattle on short rest. I think they got the wrong team favored, but that's me. Final two games. The Panthers are the last one we haven't really talked about. The Panthers, the Seahawks will be 1.5 point favorites. I think this is they were favorites at the Titans, and that's it. So the only two teams that they're favored to beat on the road are the Panthers and the Colts. Obviously, the Panthers, Bryce Young, had a really strong end to their year last year. They added Tet McMillan at receiver. They've got Xavier Legette. And then you've got an offensive line that started to play a little bit better last year. Akem Ekwonu, Damian Lewis revenge game, Austin Corbett at center, Robert Hunt, their high-priced free agent, other guard, Taylor Moton at right tackle. And then I just think this really is Chuba Hubbard, who had a really good year at running back last year. But I just think Bryce Young started to show that he could be a upper level quarterback to end last season. Defensively, it's an interesting crew. Carolina finished 32nd in DVOA on defense. They were 31st in pass defense and 32nd in rush defense. They did make some additions. They signed Bobby Brown, the nose tackle from the Rams. They signed Tershawn Wharton from the Chiefs to play defensive end. They signed Pat Jones, the linebacker from Minnesota. They added Trevin Moehrig from Las Vegas to play safety. So they made a few additions there. They drafted Nick Scourton, the edge rusher. They drafted Princely Umanamelian. They drafted who's, by the way, Umanamelian's an edge rusher. Both those guys are edge rushers. Lathan Ransom is the other rookie they drafted, who's a strong safety. They did draft Cam Jackson, nose tackle, who I like, from Florida. But there's a lot of projection there. So I think the defense is still very much the question mark with them. And as far as rest differential goes, the Panthers will be coming off a Sunday night game, a Sunday game against Tampa Bay at home. So normal rest for them. The Seahawks will be coming off a mini bye week because they will have played the Rams on Thursday night. The Seahawks will have a 2-day rest advantage before that. All right, final game. If you're still with me, I hope you are. Final game, Week 18 at the 49ers. The Seahawks are 4.5 point underdogs for that game. That is the same total that they are underdogs for the Rams. So when they travel to see the Rams. They're both 4.5-point underdogs. Interesting to see that. And as far as the 49ers we don't really know. The last 2 weeks, things can flex and move, so you don't really know. But 49ers will be coming off what is scheduled to be a Sunday night football game against the Bears at home. And so they will have back-to-back home games. The Seahawks, again, will be coming off of an East Coast trip against Carolina and then traveling again to go down to face the 49ers. All right, folks. Let me check on Super Chats before we wrap here. Azaz Rashid says, Seahawks getting 2 Thursday night games 3 years in a row is a travesty. League is punishing us. I really don't think so. I mean, I think you could look at a lot of teams. I think the Seahawks have a very advantageous schedule in general. I think that the league did not put them in very many terrible spots. There's no 3-game road trips. There's no back-to-back East Coast trips. There's not an early or a very late bye week. The division games are not clumped together. I think in general, they did the Seahawks a pretty good favor in this regard. So I don't think there's anything to complain about the schedule. Really, I think it's going to come down to whether the Seahawks are a better team and a more cohesive team than they were a year ago. All right, I'm going to head over, join Brock and Salk. Make sure you turn on 710 or wherever you listen to Brock and Salk. I'll be on with them in just a few minutes. I will also be back with you tomorrow as I welcome aboard Derek Klassen from the Athletic Football Show. We will talk about the Seahawks offseason, and that'll be an awesome, awesome conversation. Can't wait for it. Until then, make sure you give the show a like, click, subscribe. Give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever you're listening. If you want ad-free audio, patreon.com/hawkblogger gets you ad-free audio every single day. It also gets you access to the Discord channel where there's a community of hundreds of really cool folks talking Seahawks, talking Mariners, talking all sorts of stuff all day long. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your Thursday. I'm Brian Nemhauser. This has been another episode of Hawk Blogger Morning.